And what they realized pretty quickly was it's I-95. It's a huge thoroughfare, a lot of commerce. It has to get opened up as fast as possible, as safe as possible.
Welcome to OwlSpeak, where we discuss what's going on at the Temple College of Engineering. I'm your host, Casey Tinney, who will let you in behind the scenes with our Temple Engineering faculty, students, and alumni. Today, we're excited to welcome alum Archie Filshill, PhD, founder and CEO of AeroAggregates, LLC. He was also recently named to Temple's Gallery of Success. Archie, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So you're here today on campus. You got a whole rundown of events. What exactly are the events you're here for today?
So we have an Industrial Action Committee meeting for the engineering school this afternoon at 12, the investiture of President Fry at 2 o'clock, and then the Gallery of Success at 4. So it's a full day at Temple.
Very busy day. And then you were named to the Gallery of Success. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, what it means to you, how that came about, what the Gallery of Success is?
So it's a real honor to be recognized by Temple University's engineering school, because there's been a lot of great engineers that have come out, and there's a lot of great engineers that have been recognized through this Gallery of Success. So to be part of that is a real honor.
That's amazing and well-deserved for the Gallery of Success. We'll come back to a little bit of that more later.
Sure, thanks.
So you got a bachelor's in engineering from Temple in 1988.
Correct.
And then tell us a little bit about your company, AeroAggregates. Were you the founder, or how did that come about?
Yeah, so I am the founder of Aero. I started that prior to Aero. I had a design-build construction company. And looking at different lightweight materials, I was introduced to foam glass aggregate, which had been in Europe for maybe 30 years, but nothing done with it in the States. So when we saw the technology, we spent a lot of time with the engineers in Europe that were using it, some of the manufacturers, and then decided it would be a really good fit for the U.S. market, especially on some of these geotechnical projects that we were working on previously. So that's how it got started.
Okay, very interesting. Could you explain kind of what foam glass is?
Sure. So we take glass that nobody wants that would otherwise go to landfill. So our raw material is all landfill diverted glass. So these are wine bottles, mayonnaise jars. We take it, we have our first facility is down in Eddystone, just outside of Philadelphia by the airport. We take the glass, we clean it, which is taking the paper and plastic off, the labels and caps, and then we mill it into a very fine powder. And then that powder, we add 1%, 2% of a recycled mineral, which acts as a foaming agent. We heat the powder up. We don't melt the glass like a glass blower would melt glass. We just heat it up enough to soften it, activate the foaming agent, and it literally bakes up into a cake. And when the cake comes out of the heating process, the temperature drop puts thermal stress in the cake, and it cracks into inch and a half aggregate. So It's all done by Mother Nature, basically. And then we use those aggregates in all types of applications. But the majority of what we work on right now are infrastructure projects, highways, airports, bridge approaches, a lot of resiliency projects.
That's very cool. That's such a cool process. Like, think of like a glass mayonnaise jar or something and how that can end up being used in a construction project. You said this has been in Europe for 30 years prior to it coming to the U.S.?
Yes, correct.
Were you one of the first people to bring it over from the U.S.? Or?
Yes, we were. There was a small company that was doing a different form of it, but for the infrastructure market, we were the first ones to bring it in and introduce it to state DOTs and federal highways. So now we're shipping projects all over the country. We do projects on the West Coast, which for a lot of people doesn't make sense. You're shipping rocks across country, but they're ultra lightweight rocks, and we use rail to get them to places like California and Seattle.
So you've kind of seen the industry grow. You've been a part of the industry growing in the United States.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
from the beginning, yeah.
That's really cool. So I want to talk a little bit more about the aggregates. You're saying you're shipping rocks across the country. How does that then become part of the highways infrastructure that we see? You know, I think like a huge overpass, but how did that come from like these little glass rocks?
Sure. So what we focus on, we work with engineers on their design. So engineers across the country. And if we use Philadelphia, I'll give you a very close example. Girard Avenue, the ramp onto I-95 is about 25 foot high. If they brought in regular traditional fill soils and aggregates, the weight of that would cause a lot of settlement because there's very soft soils along the Delaware River. So by using our material, which is 85% lighter, they can excavate some of the existing soil, bring in that 20-foot ramp, and the soil below it feels no new weight. So if it feels no new weight, there's no settlement. So it's just kind of a very quick and easy way for an engineer to look at how to increase these grades around areas that would otherwise not handle that weight.
That's amazing to hear about. I feel like you're just driving, you don't think anything of it.
Yeah,
when
you don't
you're
know
on
what's
there.
underneath you. Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about I-95, the Girard portion, but in 2023, a portion of I-95 in Philadelphia collapsed, made national news. I think I read somewhere that you were contacted within 2 hours of the collapse. Is that true?
Yeah, it was a Saturday or Sunday morning, excuse me, and I was coming up the Atlantic City Expressway, and probably around 8:15, I'd heard on the news that there was a bridge collapse, but I didn't think about Aero being part of the fix. But within 2 hours, we had a call from the Harold Windish, who was the district engineer for District 6. And you see that call on a Sunday morning at 8 o'clock. He said, this isn't a regular call. Why,
No.
why am I getting a call this early? And he told me about what had happened. I said, I heard on the news. And what they realized pretty quickly was it's I-95. It's a huge thoroughfare, a lot of commerce. It has to get opened up as fast as possible, as safe as possible. And their quick solution was, they knew it would take a long time to rebuild a bridge. So if we could just bring fill in between the two abutments, you'll lose the off-ramp. But if you bring the fill in, you can open the road back up while you work on the permanent fix. The issue they had, that section of roadway has a lot of underground utilities. There's a water line, a sewer line, a stormwater line. And with 25 feet of traditional fill, it would have been too much weight, and they were worried about collapsing those utilities. So they called and said, look, we know we need fill, but it has to be ultra lightweight. And the first question is, do you have enough? Fortunately, we had enough. And then they needed 5-6 days to basically do the demolition of the bridge that collapsed and remove all the concrete and steel, and then start the reconstruction. So we were given about 4 days notice to work on the engineering part of it, the design, to show that it works, organize some other materials, some reinforcing materials that would go along with the foam glass, and then started on a Thursday, and within 3 days had the entire thing rebuilt. Now, we supply the material. It was Buckley and Company is the contractor that actually does the work. But that whole section got redone in 3 days. So it gave them their lightweight material. It was done really fast. And they had a lot of rain on the first day, and it's one of the benefits of the foam glass. It's not affected by weather.
Oh, wow.
So even during the torrential downpour, they were still able to keep building and not lose any time because of bad weather.
That's amazing. That whole story is fascinating. So you were just driving one Sunday, got a call, had 4 days basically to do the design, and then 3 days to build it. Did I get the
Yes.
timeline correct?
Yeah, exactly.
That's insane.
Yeah,
That's such a whirlwind process. You said luckily you guys had enough of the aggregate available. Did you have to do anything else to prepare in terms of supply? Did you have other projects that maybe got put on hold while you were working on this?
So we're pretty fortunate. We had enough material. We also have a second facility now in Florida. So we knew we had a buffer supply should we need more material. But I think the big part of this was the team at Aero. The big difference was we had to ramp up people to be able to load trucks 24/7 because they were working 24 hours a day and we were shipping 24 hours a day. A lot of teamwork on both sides.
Had you worked on anything like this prior to this project, or is this kind of a once-in-a-lifetime unique thing for you guys?
You know, I think we worked on repair projects, but never something of this magnitude with the national and even some international attention this had. You know, from I would say a political point or a national news point, I've never worked on anything bigger than that. I mean, we were invited in to give a briefing to the governor and the President Biden at the time because we were using this new material. So although PennDOT was comfortable because we'd worked with PennDOT on a lot of projects and the engineers were, when the news story broke that they're using this new foam glass, there was really mixed feelings in the community of some people thought we were stacking up broken bottles, which didn't make people comfortable. So we had to explain it. And so we got Edis to do this briefing to explain what it was, how it's been used. And we'd been working with PennDOT for 5 years prior to that, but nobody knew about it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until we got this kind of national attention. And since then, we've been doing other significant emergency repairs. We're out in the Teton bypass, fixing a 100-foot slope that collapsed that goes into Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Oh, wow.
And some emergency work down in New Orleans, too.
That was going to be my next question. Did you see kind of an uptick in emergency requests? Was that something you had done prior? Was collapse or things like that were urgent?
Yeah, we had a handful of projects like that were collapses where we went back and did some repairs. But without a doubt, the I-95 built a huge amount of awareness about foam glass nationally. Because it got open so fast, we had a lot of invites to give talks to other state DOTs, other engineering groups by invite. So, it's not just me. We have a whole team at Aero, a whole team of engineers. So we spent about a year afterwards by invite going to all these different states, explaining to them what foam glass was, how it's used, and the details of the 95 project. Yeah,
I remember reading the article, seeing that they were using foam glass and being like, I don't understand how that works, but if it's going to get 95 open, that's really cool. So it's really interesting to hear you explain how it all worked.
Yeah, I think that's one of the limitations is the fact that people think glass, oh, you're going to drive on it's going to crush and go into a powder. And we spend a lot of time with the engineers showing how that doesn't happen and why it doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think the skill to be able to explain that to people who don't really understand, like you said, they think like, I'm driving over glass, like how is that safe? Mm-hmm. I think the skill to be able to explain that process and understand why it's safe and why people should be using it is very valuable. So you also mentioned that the glass material is made of 100% recyclable or diverted glass from a landfill.
Correct.
Was that something that you made a conscious decision about, or is that the way they do it in Europe, the way that you learned, or how did that come about?
Yeah, kind of twofold. So when I had the construction business, we looked at a lot of beneficial reuse using waste materials in construction. There's always kind of environmental baggage that comes along with that, proving that the material's clean, it's not going to leach. So the benefit of glass is it's an inert material. And it's not regulated because it's clean. There's nothing bad. It's, you drink out of glass, right? So it's clean. Early in the career, we looked at using crushed glass as a drainage aggregate. But what we found when you look at crushed glass and you're putting on a job site, the opinion is it looks like you're dropping waste or trash into somebody's project. So most owners don't like the idea of using cullet, which is the broken pieces of glass by itself. But with foam glass, it's still the same recycled glass, but because it's been ground into a powder and then foamed, it literally looks like a rock, and it's a gray rock, so it doesn't look like a waste material, although it's all recycled glass. So that was a huge benefit. So we'd always looked at how to introduce recycled materials into construction, and it's not easy for a lot of reasons. But foam glass seemed to check a lot of the good boxes and didn't bring along any of the negative boxes that you would have with some other recycled materials.
That's really interesting. So a lot of it was a visual, or like, I guess people's perception of it. Like they don't want to use old glass because it doesn't look like it. They're okay with it.
Exactly.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Has, bringing more recyclable material and reusing things always been important to you in your career, or was that something that it just really worked out with AeroAggregates? No,
I've been looking at recycled materials for probably the last 15 years, maybe even a little bit longer. My PhD was on using nanocomposites to take recycled polyethylene and polypropylene to make them stronger than virgin plastics. So the problem with using recycled plastics are you lose a lot of strength. Mm-hmm. But if you can add these clay nanocomposites, you can make them stronger. So that goes back to even my PhD work. So there's always been an interest in doing that and seeing how you can get them to fit in. And through the years, you learn it's not always easy. It's not easy being green. That's one of our favorite saying. But with the foam glass, it just seemed, like I said earlier, it just seems to check all the positives and didn't really bring along any of the negatives with it. So that's when we saw it. It was like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. This is worth taking a run at. That's
amazing. I feel like we have a professor here who's working on I may pronounce wrong, carbonatable concrete. Yes. So kind of reducing the concrete CO2 emissions. And it's just fascinating to learn about all these ways that you can make the construction industry greener and how much emissions it really gives off. So it's great that right here in Philadelphia, you had this terrible thing where 95 collapsed, but it turned into, using recyclable materials, getting it open so quickly. It's really just amazing to hear about the whole process. Yeah, I think one of our other benefits on that project was 95 was closed. So one of the concerns the contractor had was how you're going to get this material to the job site. Oh, yeah. Right? Another thing you don't even think about. So the state police and the Philadelphia police work to kind of keep an access lane. But because our material's so light, we can use these long walking floor trucks, which hold about 90 to 100 cubic yards, versus a dump truck that holds maybe 13. So we were able to do in about 80 truckloads what would have been over 600 truckloads if it was traditional fill. So there was a reduced carbon footprint, obviously, from the reduced amount of traffic, but there was just that logistics of getting that fewer number of trucks through a traffic jam and a shoulder bypass to the same location. So there was some benefits from that too. That's really cool. I feel like every fact you're giving me about this repair, I'm like, this is fascinating. Yeah. This is so interesting. So I guess what is your hope for the future of AeroAggregates? You mentioned that you're getting more emergency repairs for AeroAggregates. Is that something you want to maybe specialize in, or do you just hope to see the foam glass industry really expand in the United States? What's your hope for the future there?
Yeah, I think for AeroAggregates, we're looking at kind of expanding our footprint. So we started in Philadelphia with one production line in 2017. We have 3 now in Eddystone. We have 2 down in Florida, and we are shipping material to the West Coast. So the first goal is to get some capacity on the West Coast to support that growth. The other thing is the main industry that we support is infrastructure, but there's probably 24 other applications for foam glass. So trying to balance that footprint on the infrastructure, but also looking at the future of other facilities to do some of these other applications. It's the same equipment, same process, but just looking at the details, the testing required to get into a couple of these other markets with foam glass.
Are you able to explain any of the other potential applications?
Yeah, sure. We do. One of the things we've looked at and we've done the R&D on successfully is crushing the large rocks into smaller aggregate and using it in concrete to make lightweight concrete or cinder blocks or concrete blocks. And the benefit is not only are you making it lightweight, but you're adding thermal resistance in the concrete or the block because the foam glass has air bubbles, which act as an insulator.
Interesting.
So you've got noise absorption, thermal protection, lightweight, and some higher fire ratings on the blocks. So that's a market that we've been R&Ding for about 2 years now, and not quite ready for prime time, but getting ready. We have another system we use as a floating cover. The rocks are light enough they can float.
Wow, okay.
So we can use it to float over lagoons that have odor problems to prevent evaporation and to control odors. So like a landfill, a leachate lagoon, or maybe a manure pit at a farm. By floating the aggregates on the surface of the water, you prevent the evaporation. If you prevent the evaporation, you eliminate the odor. Yeah, and then some other composite materials that we look at putting the foam glass into.
That's amazing, hearing all the use for this foam glass. So you are CEO of AeroAggregates. What are some challenges you face as CEO of a company, and how do you feel your engineering degree maybe prepared you for facing those challenges?
Oh, that's a great question. I think, running any business, there's a lot of challenges. I think for Aero right now is managing the growth, right? There's the financing aspect of it, not getting too far out ahead of your skis and trying to pace that growth. One of the first decisions for Aero was building the right team. So our team are all engineers. And I think, when you're growing a business, you get a lot of emotion that comes into the business of what you want to do, and you want to expand and you want to do that. But I think the engineering part of it gives you the analytical skills to kind of remove the emotion, do the numbers and see what makes sense, whether it's the growing to new locations, new applications, what type of R&D you're going to do. And you mentioned it earlier, we have to discuss with engineers how to use this material and why it's safe and where to use it and where not to use it. So having that engineering background to speak to other engineers, to do that teaching and learning experience, that's been pretty valuable. But without a doubt, I think even though I'm a lot more business oriented these days, we still work with a lot of engineers, but the engineering skills for my whole career have really helped as far as just doing more analytical thought process on growing a business.
That's very interesting to hear you break that down. I think we hear a lot, we've had a couple business owners on talk about just the analytical aspect of it, how engineering really helps you see the problem and figure out all the best possible solutions. It really prepares you for that.
Yes, for sure.
What advice would you give to students who are looking to maybe expand their skills outside of engineering to maybe go into the business lane as well? What is some advice you have for them?
Yeah, I got into engineering as a result of my dad, I say politely, pushing me into engineering. But part of it was with the engineering degree, you could get into a lot of different businesses, right? With the business degree, you might not necessarily be able to get into engineering. So the engineering background, I really think if you have the engineering background and you want to go to business, whether it's starting a business or work in a manufacturing facility, without a doubt, it does give you the I'd say the analytical skills to really work through problems. And I think it can be applied through so many businesses. So if your undergrad degrees in engineering, you decide to do an MBA or something, it's kind of a killer combo, right? To learn those business skills, but have that engineering background.
Do you have an MBA, or I know you have your PhD?
No, I never did an MBA, but I worked for a company for about 5 years overseas. And I always consider that my on-the-job training MBA.
I mean, nothing will make you learn it quicker than just having to do
Having
it.
to do it, 100%.
So you were recently named, we mentioned earlier, to Temple's Gallery of Success, and in 2023, you were named to the Delaware Valley Engineer of the Year. What do these awards represent to you? What does it mean, helping the local community, helping Philadelphia where your company got started? What does, getting the recognition mean to you?
Yeah, it's something that you don't, I guess, think about until it happens. But without a doubt, I mean, both the Delaware Valley Engineer of the Year through the Engineers Club as well as the Gallery of Success, it is truly an honor, right? I look at people that have gotten these awards in front of me. And the Engineer of the Year, there was one of my mentors is on there.
Oh, wow.
So to be on the same list of people you really admire and look up to, it's great. It's a real honor to be part of that. And to be in Philadelphia, taking care of an issue on 95 when you grew up 2 exits away from it is kind of neat too. That you've got your business is solving a major problem in the city you grew up in, and kind of getting that type of exposure. So the combination is the last couple of years have been great.
That's such a full circle moment. That must have
Absolutely,
been really
yeah.
exciting when you saw the success of it and kind of the national attention. That's amazing. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss about your time at Temple, or anything else you wanted to add about AeroAggregates, or just in general?
Yeah, I think for me going to Temple University, it was kind of an obvious choice, right? I grew up in Northeast Philadelphia. I didn't have a car.
Yeah, that makes
Right.
it an easier choice.
So it was a very long SEPTA commute, taking the bus to Frankfurt and the Broad Street line up, but it worked. So doing that for years, Temple was a natural choice. I was a walk-on the soccer team my freshman year.
Oh, wow,
Yeah.
really?
But didn't add a whole lot to the team, and trying to do an engineering degree, it was a one-year event for me. But made a lot of great friends that I'm still friends with today. And then was invited back to adjunct for a couple of years. So I adjunct for about 8 years up until COVID. And that was also kind of a neat full circle moment, coming back to the same classrooms that you learned in to be at the front of the room.
Yeah, I imagine that must be a very interesting experience. You're in charge now. You're the
Yeah,
teacher.
and teaching in the same room you remember taking classes in is kind of neat.
That's so cool. That's really amazing. Well, thank you, Archie, so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your very busy schedule for today. And congratulations again on Gallery of Success.
Thank you, appreciate it.